For years I thought my uncle was the only one in the family who truly saw me for who I was, but when I overheard him telling others that I was a disappointment, I realized his kindness was nothing but a mask, and the person I admired most was never real. I thought I cheated on Sarah because I thought I deserved better, and my Uncle Rick had been telling me exactly that for years. Sitting in that hotel room with Jessica from accounting, watching her get dressed while my phone buzzed with Sarah's goodnight text, I felt like the king of the world. Uncle Rick always said I was too good for small town, too smart for one woman, too special to settle down at 28. The affair started 3 months ago. Jessica was everything Sarah wasn't, confident where Sarah was shy, spontaneous where Sarah planned everything, adventurous where Sarah was reserved. When Jessica suggested we grab drinks after the quarterly meeting, I heard Uncle Rick's voice in my head. Or young, talented, successful, why tie down to the first girl who showed attention? Sarah and I had been together 4 years. We were supposed to get married next spring. She'd already put the deposit down on the venue, spent weekends looking at dresses with her sister. But Jessica made me feel alive in ways I'd forgotten existed. The sneaking around, the lies, the adrenaline rush of almost getting caught, it was intoxicating. Uncle Rick was the only family member who ever really got me. While my parents pushed me towards stability and commitment, he talked about adventure and potential. He'd divorced twice, lived in 6 different states, started 3 businesses. He was everything I thought I wanted to be: free, independent, answerable to no one. Marriage is a trap, nephew. He'd say during family barbecues, clapping me on the shoulder while Sarah helped my mom in the kitchen. Look at father, 25 years with the same woman, same job, same routine. Is that really living? I started believing him. Sarah became boring in my eyes. Her excitement about wedding planning felt suffocating. Her talks about our future, buying a house, having kids, growing old together, made feel claustrophobic. Jessica represented escape from all that mundane domesticity. The lies came so easily it scared me. Business trips that weren't business trips. Late nights at the office that were actually late nights in Jessica's apartment. I deleted text, cleared browser history of deception. Sarah never suspected a thing because she trusted me completely. That trust should have made me feel guilty. Instead, it made me feel superior. She was naive, I told. Too trusting, too innocent for the real world. Uncle Rick had prepared me for this reality, that some people were predators and others were prey. I was finally embracing my true nature. The with Jessica was incredible, but it wasn't just physical. She made me feel like the man I'd always wanted to be: sophisticated, dangerous, irresistible. We'd meet at expensive hotels, take weekend trips to the city, live like we were characters in a movie. Sarah's simple pleasures, movie nights on the couch, hiking local trails, cooking dinner together, seemed pathetic by comparison. I started pulling away from emotionally long before she noticed. I'd come home from seeing Jessica and feel annoyed by Sarah's affection, irritated by her innocent questions about my day. She'd try to initiate and I'd make excuses, claiming exhaustion or stress. How could she compete with what Jessica and I had? Uncle Rick's philosophy was working its way deeper into my psyche. Nest guys finish last, he'd say. Women say they want commitment, but they're attracted to guys who keep them guessing, or doing Sarah a favor by not getting trapped in marriage before ready. I convinced I was being smart, strategic. I'd have my fun with Jessica, get it out of my system, then settle down with Sarah when I was truly ready. Best of both worlds. Uncle Rick had taught me that successful men took what they wanted without apology. The night everything changed started like any other. Jessica and I were at our usual hotel, planning a weekend in Vegas. She was talking about potentially leaving her husband, maybe starting fresh somewhere new with me. The conversation made me uncomfortable because Jessica was supposed to be the no strings attached option. My phone rang, Sarah's ringtone. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Uncle Rick is in the hospital. Her voice was shaking. Mom asked me to call. It's serious, a heart. They don't know if he's gonna make it. I drove straight to the hospital, leaving Jessica confused and angry in that hotel room. The 40-minute drive felt like hours, my mind racing between worry for Uncle Rick and panic about how to handle the Jessica situation if things got complicated. Sarah was in the waiting room with my parents, still in her scrubs from her nursing shift. She'd come straight from work when my mom called. Seeing her there, tired and worried, caring about my family crisis even though we'd been distant lately, should have sparked some recognition of what I was throwing away. Instead, I felt annoyed that my double might get exposed. Uncle Rick survived the surgery, but he was unconscious for 3 days. I spent those days juggling hospital visits with increasingly frantic texts from Jessica. She wanted to know what was happening, when we could continue our Vegas plans, why I was suddenly unavailable. The pressure of maintaining both relationships while dealing with a family crisis was exhausting. On the 3rd day, while Uncle Rick was still sedated, I overheard a conversation that shattered everything. My dad was talking to my Aunt Linda in the hallway outside Rick's room. I was coming back from the cafeteria when I heard my name. The kid worships Rick, Dad was saying. Always has, ever since. Is so sad. Aunt Linda replied. Rick talks about him like he's this huge disappointment. Says he's weak, indecisive, wasting his potential. Calls him a mama's boy behind his back. I stopped walking, coffee burning my hand as my grip loosened. I know, Dad continued. But he puts on this big show when he's around, acting like the cool uncle who believes in him. I think Rick gets some kind of kick out of it, having someone look to him when he knows he's just playing a role. Remember last Christmas? Rick was talking about how pathetic it was that a grown man still needed his uncle's approval for everything. Said watching him follow advice was like watching a puppet dance. The coffee cup slipped from my hand, shattering on the hospital floor. Everything I thought I knew about my relationship with Uncle Rick, about the wisdom he'd shared with me, it was all a lie. The man I'd modeled my after saw me as entertainment, a weak-minded fool dancing to his tune for his amusement. I stood in that hallway, surrounded by the smell of defectant and the sound of medical equipment, realizing that everything I'd done in the past few months had been based on advice from someone who viewed me with contempt. The cheating, the lies, the way I treated Sarah, the persona I'd adopted, none of it was really me. It was all Rick's influence, and Rick didn't even respect me enough to be honest about who he really was. Sarah found me sitting on the floor next to the broken coffee cup, staring at nothing. Ani, what's wrong? Look like seen a ghost. I wanted to tell her everything right then. The affair, the lies, the revelation about Uncle Rick. I wanted to confess and beg forgiveness and start over. But Jessica chose that moment to call, and when Sarah saw Jessica work on my phone screen, something in her expression changed. Should probably take that, she said quietly, and I heard something in her voice I'd never heard before. Suspicion. I declined the call, but the damage was done. Sarah's nursing intuition, the same skill that made her so good at rating patients, was finally reading me. That night while Uncle Rick remained unconscious, Sarah went through my phone. I woke to find her sitting in our kitchen at 3 a.m., my phone in front of her, tears streaming down her face. She'd found everything, the texts, the photos, the hotel receipts I'd forgotten to delete. 6 months of lies laid bare in the harsh fluorescent light. 4 years, she whispered when she saw me. 4 years we've been together, and this is who really are. I tried to explain about Uncle Rick, about the advice, about how confused I'd been, but hearing make excuses using Rick's philosophy when I now knew he viewed me as a joke made everything sound even more pathetic. Blaming Uncle for choices. Sarah's voice was hollow. Her 28 years old, chose to lie to me every single day for months, chose to sleep with her, chose to plan a future with me while building a different future with someone else. She was right. Rick's influence might have shaped my thinking, but every text to Jessica, every lie to Sarah, every moment in that hotel room, those were my choices. I was trying to shift blame to a man who was currently fighting for his, and that made me even more. Sarah left that night, packed a bag and went to her sister's house, said she needed space to think, but we both knew she was really trying to figure out if there was anything left of our relationship worth salvaging. I called Jessica the next morning and ended things. She took it better than I expected. Turns out she'd been having similar conversations with 2 other married men. I wasn't special to her either, I was just convenient. Uncle Rick woke 2 days later. The first thing he said when he saw me was, "Look terrible, nephew. Whatever's got down, remember, is too short to waste on regret." Uncle Rick recovered enough to come home after 2 weeks. I spent those weeks trying to rebuild something with Sarah, but every conversation felt like performing surgery with broken tools. The trust was gone, and without trust, everything else just felt like going through motions. She agreed to try counseling, but I could see in her eyes that she was already somewhere else emotionally. The woman who used to light when I walked into a room now looked at me like she was studying a stranger. Worse, like she was studying a stranger she didn't particularly like. The therapist asked hard questions I wasn't prepared to answer. Why did I think I deserved 2 relationships when Sarah only had 1? What made me believe my needs were more important than her emotional safety? How did I justify months of looking her in the eye while living a double? I kept trying to circle back to Uncle Rick's influence, the philosophy he'd fed me about successful men taking what they wanted. But Dr. Martinez, our counselor, kept redirecting me to personal accountability. Even if Uncle influenced thinking. She said during our 3rd session, adults make their own choices about how to treat people they claim to love. What does it say about character that we're so easily swayed into betraying someone who trusted completely? Sarah spoke for the first time in 20 minutes. Says he never really loved me at all. People protect what they love. That night I went to see Uncle Rick. He was in his living room still weak but holding court like always, telling my cousin Mike about some business opportunity that was guaranteed money. If Mike could just think bigger. I waited until Mike left, then confronted Rick about what I'd overheard at the hospital. His reaction was worse than I could have imagined. He laughed. Actually took all that advice seriously. He was genuinely amused. I was just messing with, seeing how far'd go. I never thought to actually toll over some I said at barbecues. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical. This man had watched me destroy the best relationship I'd ever had encouraged me to become someone I hated, all for his entertainment. Told me marriage was a trap, said I was too good for Sarah, that I should explore my options, and believe me, Rick's laugh was getting nastier. Jesus, really are as weak as I always said. No wonder Sarah's probably gonna leave. What woman wants a man who can't think for himself? That's when I realized the full scope of the trap I'd built for. Uncle Rick had never been wise or worldly or successful. He'd been divorced twice because he was selfish and cruel. He'd moved 6 states because people eventually figured out who he really was. His businesses failed because he treated everyone like marks in his personal con game. I'd modeled after a man who was fundamentally broken, and now I was broken too. Sarah filed for divorce 3 weeks later. Not because I'd cheated, she might have been able to work through that eventually. She divorced me because of who the cheating revealed me to be, someone so desperate for approval that I'd remake my entire moral compass based on the opinion of a man who viewed me with contempt. I fell in love with someone who didn't really exist, she told me when she served the papers. And I can't figure out if the man I thought was ever real, or if this selfish stranger was always who were underneath. The divorce was swift and brutal. Sarah kept the house, she put down the larger down payment anyway. I moved into a studio apartment across town. The kind of place that smelled like other people's failures and had thin walls that broadcast every neighbor's dysfunction. Jessica had already moved on to her next conquest, a VP at a competing firm who took her to better restaurants than I ever had. She treated our months together like they'd never happened, which should have stung but mostly just reinforced how meaningless the whole affair had been. Uncle Rick recovered fully and went right back to his old patterns. He started dating a woman 20 years younger, telling everyone at family gatherings how was too short not to live it. When my mom mentioned that I was struggling with the divorce, Rick just shrugged and said, "Some people can handle freedom, some people can't." The family dynamic shifted after that. People who used to see Rick as the fun, adventurous brother started recognizing what I should have seen years earlier. He was a predator who fed on other people's insecurities. But by then, I'd already learned all his lessons. Work became unbearable. Everyone knew about the divorce, and in a small town everyone had opinions about who was at fault. Sarah was like she'd volunteered at the local animal shelter, helped coach youth soccer, always remembered people's birthdays. I was just the guy who away the town sweetheart for a quick thrill with someone from out of town. Professional relationships turned cold. Clients started working with other agents. Colleagues stopped including me in after-work drinks. I became a cautionary tale whispered around the water cooler. Look what happened, everything and it all away. The loneliness was crushing. I'd lost my wife, my home, my social circle, my professional reputation, and my family's respect all in the span of a few months. Worse, I'd lost any sense of who I actually was underneath all of Rick's programming. At night, I'd lie in my studio apartment listening to the couple next door about money, and I'd think about Sarah. She was probably dating by now. Everyone said she deserved happiness after what I'd put her through. Some other man was getting the I'd thrown away, benefiting from all the love and trust I'd shattered. The worst part wasn't the guilt or the loneliness or even the public shame. The worst part was the growing realization that I didn't know how to be a good person anymore. Rick's had seeped so deep into my thinking that I couldn't tell which of my thoughts were authentically mine, and which were echoes of his manipulation. I started seeing Dr. Martinez individually after Sarah stopped coming to sessions. She helped me understand that I'd spent so many years seeking Uncle Rick's approval that I'd never developed my own moral compass. Without his influence I was just empty. Recovery means building authentic values from scratch, she explained. But that's terrifying work, because it means acknowledging that the person been for years was essentially hollow. The holidays were the worst. Sarah and I should have been celebrating our first Christmas as a married couple. Instead, I spent Christmas Eve alone in my studio apartment, listening to my neighbors play music too loud and wondering if anyone would even notice if I disappeared entirely. New Year's came and went without fanfare. I made resolutions I knew I wouldn't keep, to rebuild, to become better, to somehow earn redemption I didn't deserve. But deep down, I knew the truth that Dr. Martinez was too kind to say directly: some mistakes don't get fixed. Some trust, once broken, never heals. Some people, once they show who they really are, never get the chance to pretend to be someone better. I was 30 years old, living alone in a studio apartment, professionally damaged, socially isolated and emotionally bankrupt. Uncle Rick was right about one thing: I was exactly the disappointment he'd always said I was. The only difference was that now I knew he'd helped make me that way on purpose, for fun. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Sarah at the grocery store. She was with someone new, a tall guy with kind eyes who held her hand like it was precious. She looked happier than I'd ever seen her, practically glowing with the kind of contentment I'd convinced she was too boring to achieve. She saw me staring and gave me a polite nod, the kind of acknowledgement give any stranger. No anger, no recognition of the years we'd shared. I'd become nothing to her, which was somehow worse than if she'd still hated me. That night, I called Uncle Rick. I don't know what I was hoping for, maybe some final wisdom, maybe an apology, maybe just someone to share the misery with. Sound terrible, he said when he heard my voice. What's eating now? I told him about seeing Sarah, about the divorce being final, about how empty everything felt. Well, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, I guess learned the most important lesson of all: some people are just born to be alone. I realized then that Uncle Rick had never been trying to help me become a better man. He'd been trying to create another version of himself, bitter, isolated, feeding on other people's destruction because his own was too empty to sustain him, and he'd succeeded perfectly.